The last breath. The house was a behemoth of weathered wood and shadowed corners, a relic of a time when shadows were deeper and fears more profound. I'd inherited it from an eccentric great-aunt, a woman who had lived a life shrouded in mystery, as enigmatic as the house itself. It was a place where time seemed to slow, where the creak of floorboards carried the weight of centuries. December 13th was a night when the wind howled like a wounded beast, its mournful cry echoing through the skeletal frame of the house. A night when shadows stretched and danced, taking on grotesque forms in the flickering candlelight. I was a man of reason, a skeptic in a world of wonder, yet as the night deepened, a chill seeped into my bones that logic couldn't dispel. It began with a whisper, a soft, almost inaudible brush against my senses, a sound that carried the weight of forgotten secrets. It led me to the attic, a labyrinth of shadows and forgotten treasures. Cobwebs clung to the rafters like ghostly veils, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. A single bare bulb cast eerie circles of light on the dusty floor, creating an unsettling dance of shadows. As I ventured deeper into the attic, the whisper grew louder, more insistent. It was a sound that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the house, a haunting melody carried on the wind. A cold dread, as palpable as the icy draft that swept through the room, enveloped me. My heart pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching darkness. Then I saw it. A figure, shrouded in shadow, stood at the far end of the attic. Its form was indistinct, a mere silhouette against the gloom, yet its eyes, two burning orbs of malevolent intent, pierced through the darkness. A cold terror seized me, a primal fear that threatened to consume me whole. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure moved, with a swiftness that defied human comprehension. Its movements were fluid, graceful in their menace. I could hear the rapid thump of my heart, a deafening rhythm in the silent expanse of the attic. Its hand, icy and skeletal, closed around my throat. The world contracted, focused solely on the crushing pressure. Time seemed to slow, each passing second an eternity of torment. The air grew thin, and my vision blurred at the edges. A cold panic washed over me as consciousness began to slip away. I awoke in my bed, the first light of dawn casting long shadows across the room. My throat burned, and a metallic taste lingered in my mouth. The memory of the night was a fragmented mosaic, a series of terrifying snapshots. Fear, like a cold fog, settled over me. Days turned into weeks as I grappled with the aftermath. The house, once a place of solitude, became a prison of shadows. Every creak, every groan was a reminder of that night. Sleep was a fleeting visitor, haunted by nightmares of the shadowy figure. With time, the terror began to subside, replaced by a cold, detached acceptance. I learned to coexist with the fear, to find solace in the mundane. Yet, on nights when the wind howls with a particular intensity, when the old house seems to shudder with a life of its own, the memory returns, as fresh and terrifying as ever. I often wonder if that night was a product of a fevered imagination, a trick of the mind played on a solitary soul. Or perhaps it was a glimpse into a realm beyond human comprehension, a dark corner of reality where shadows have substance and fear is a tangible force. Whatever the truth, the experience left an indelible mark on my soul. The last breath, a fleeting moment suspended in time, remains a haunting question. Was it the end, or merely the beginning of a journey into the unknown? As weeks turned into months, the fear began to morph into something more insidious, a cold, calculating dread that seeped into the marrow of my bones. The house, once a familiar sanctuary, became a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurred. I began to notice strange occurrences, inexplicable phenomena that defied logic. Objects moved, doors creaked open of their own accord, and shadows seemed to take on a life of their own. At first I dismissed these as tricks of the mind, the residue of that terrifying night. But as the incidents grew in frequency and intensity, a creeping doubt took hold. I found myself drawn back to the attic, a compulsion I couldn't resist. It was as if the house itself were urging me to return, to confront the darkness that had claimed a part of me. The attic had changed, or perhaps it was my perception that had altered. A cold, almost ethereal energy seemed to permeate the space, a presence that was both tangible and elusive. Then, one night, as I sat alone in the living room, the house came alive. A cacophony of sounds filled the air, floorboards creaking, walls groaning, and a chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from every corner. Fear, sharp and immediate, seized me. I was not alone. Something was moving through the house, a presence that was both unseen and utterly terrifying. I could feel its gaze upon me, a cold, penetrating stare that chilled me to the bone. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen force. With a surge of courage, born of desperation, I confronted the darkness. I armed myself with a flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom like a sword. I moved through the house, room by room, searching for the source of the terror. The attic was the final frontier, the heart of darkness. With trembling hands, I ascended the creaking stairs. The moment I stepped into the attic, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the flashlight. I was plunged into utter blackness, the only sound the frantic pounding of my heart. Then I heard it, a sound that froze the blood in my veins. A whisper, close, intimate, and filled with a malevolent glee. It was a voice that seemed to emanate from the shadows, a voice that carried the promise of eternal torment. And then, silence, a heavy silence that pressed down upon me like a physical force. I stood there, motionless, my senses heightened, my mind racing. I was alone, or so I thought. A cold touch grazed my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I whirled around, but there was nothing. Yet, I knew I was not alone. The entity, whatever it was close, very close. A cold hand, ethereal and icy, closed around my wrist. Panic surged through me, a desperate struggle against the unseen force. I thrashed, but it was futile. The darkness seemed to consume me, pulling me into its icy embrace. Then, silence, a void, absolute and consuming. No sound, no sensation, just an endless expanse of nothingness. Or perhaps it was something more. A presence, vast and indifferent, that enveloped me completely. I felt a tugging sensation, as if I were being pulled through a narrow tunnel, a sense of falling, of accelerating into the unknown. And then, light. A blinding, searing light that filled my vision. I opened my eyes. I was in the attic, the first rays of dawn, casting long, eerie shadows. My body ached, and my mind was a fog. I was alive, but something was irrevocably changed. I looked around, searching for signs of the night's terror. There was nothing. No evidence of the malevolent presence, no trace of the fear that had consumed me. Yet, I knew. It was real. The cold touch, the feeling of being pulled into the darkness. These were not figments of a fevered imagination. I left the house that day, never to return. The old house, with its secrets and shadows, was a part of me now, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the veil of human perception. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house. It stood there, a silent sentinel on the hill, its windows dark and empty. And in that moment, I knew that my story was far from over. The house was not abandoned. It was merely waiting, biding its time until it could claim its next victim. For in the depths of that old house on that fateful night, I had glimpsed something terrifying, something that defied explanation, and though I had escaped its clutches, a part of me remained trapped in its shadows. The last breath, I realized, was not the end. It was merely a pause, a brief respite before the next chapter of terror begins. The house was watching, and it was waiting.